My name is Brandon Garrett. I teach at Duke at the law school, and I've just written a book which I'd like to tell you about. It's about due process, and today there are all sorts of stories in the news or on social media where people are complaining of being deprived of due process or challenging notions of due process, talking about unfair treatment, whether it's at the hands of corporations or whether it's in public spaces. We all care about fairness. We all feel unfairness in our lives. Due process refers to unfairness, though, at the hands of the government. I wrote a book that came out in February called Defending Due Process: Why Fairness Matters in a Polarized World. When I wrote the book, I didn't think that due process would be as current a topic as it has become. There's definitely been discussion of due process, frequently in the weeks since the book came out. But the reason I wrote the book was that I was increasingly seeing a national problem, that due process disputes and polarization around due process was becoming more prominent, where people were openly saying, I know what due process is, I don't think those people should benefit from it. Or I want fairness for myself, but not necessarily for others. This problem fit in with research I'd been doing for years, where over time I had appreciated more and more that we all think this way, and it's natural. We all care a lot about fairness, and studies have shown that we care about procedural justice since the 70s. Children very powerfully feel unfair treatment. We've all heard kids complaining, no fair, when something goes wrong in a game or in the classroom. But when it's not us, when it's someone else, we don't necessarily see things the same way. And I've been doing studies for years, surveying people about their attitudes, and how do you balance fairness towards someone, for example, accused of a crime, versus the concern that you have about public safety in your community. And people don't just care about fairness, they care about public safety, and they care about both. And what I was finding time and time again, and we've now surveyed over 15,000 people, is that people care equally about outcomes and fairness. And so people care about fairness, but they also care about outcomes like public safety. And it's often hard to know how to balance those things. If you're told that there's going to be crime, there's going to be threats to safety, we need to jail more people, we need to forget about due process. Many people say, well, okay, I need to be safe. If you are told, look, people are being wrongly convicted, innocent people are ending up in our jails, people say that's horribly unfair, we can't have that in our society. So that's the tension that motivated the book. And I talk about research exploring how actually it's often not that kind of a zero-sum thing, where, look, if you want safety, you can't have fairness. If you want the outcome, you got to sacrifice due process. What I show is that time and time again, by improving the fairness of the process, we can actually get more of what we want as well in terms of outcomes. And I talk about different examples of this, including in Houston, where they made big changes to the bail system so that fewer people accused of misdemeanors ended up in the jail. We found that actually that improved public safety. Repeat arrests went down when due process went up. And so the whole goal of the book is to challenge this idea that there's a necessary trade-off between due process and the other things that we really care about in this country. I do see threats to due process, and not just from our attitudes and our understandable psychology around these issues, but also in the courts. It's been very mixed in recent years. How to due process challenges fair in the courts. I talk about some real notable victories where judges really dug into the fairness of systems on the ground. But other cases where judges look at what happens on paper and they think that it seems fair enough on paper, even though in practice it's not so fair. I also talk about threats from technology. And we've all seen AI systems enter our lives in all sorts of ways. Sometimes we don't even realize it's on our phone now, and how did it get there? When the government uses AI, it can create due process issues, especially if we don't know that it is there or that the government is using it, and we don't have a chance to fairly challenge it. And so I hope if you read this book, you'll find it compelling, and we'll have new questions that you want to ask about, how is it that people can have their driver's licenses taken away? Or what does it mean to have a fair trial? Who gets a fair trial? What is technology doing? And how will it affect the fairness with which people are treated by the government or in our courts? I hope you'll notice more examples of due process issues in your lives or in your communities. And please get in touch if you read the book or would like me to talk to you, a book group or on a Zoom or maybe even an event in your town. thanks again for taking the time to hear more about defending due process, and I hope you have a chance to read it.